Okay, super quick clarification check-in from Editing Amanda here. I am not trying to downplay the seriousness of the events that are being portrayed in this movie, and I realize that it is a compilation of a variety of different, like, abduction stories and online predator stories, and all that stuff is super serious. And I think that you can acknowledge that all that stuff is super serious and deserves to be concerned over, while also pointing out the flaws in a movie that's based on those things. So, happy watching the video. Thanks for listening to this PSA. So it's 2020 and people think that Megan is Missing is real. Okay, if you are a TikTok teen that has come across Megan is Missing over the past couple months, and the opening statements have you convinced that this was actually a movie put together for real life events, it's okay to calm down now, because this is not based on a specific event so much as a combination of a handful of different real life stories of online abductions and kidnappings and things like that, with some exploitation horror slammed in. This is not real footage. Motorola Razr phones were not saving all of your video conversations. Most people were not having video conversations on their phones in 2006. And no real documentary would show footage or photos of minors going through the things these girls went through. The fact that this even needs to be said, just whatever, it's fine. Also, you can Google the movie and see all of these facts immediately. Now, I am not saying this movie isn't going to bother you and that the warnings aren't justified. The last 22 minutes of this thing is literally a teenager being tortured and assaulted. Regardless of whether or not it's real, some people just don't want to see content like that. So if you don't want to see stuff like that, I would probably just recommend skipping this movie. I'm not going to show most of the bad stuff that happens because I don't want this video to get age restricted, but if you're someone who doesn't even really want to hear about that kind of stuff, I won't blame you if you want to click away, but I would like to think that for the most part, this video is going to be like pretty okay to watch. Because regardless of whether or not this is real or fake, this kind of content is going to bother people, so just keep those warnings in mind if you really find yourself wanting to watch it. But it's also just a really poorly made movie, so I wouldn't watch it based on that alone. There are significantly better things to do with your time. But I get the allure, you find out it's banned in New Zealand because they deemed that most of the content in the film would be injurious to public good, that it turned a 3-minute assault scene into a relished spectacle, and that overall sexualized the lives of these young girls to a highly exploitative level. I don't agree with the ban, but I definitely agree with their assessment of the movie. What this movie is supposed to be is a warning for parents about what their kids might be doing and the danger of their online behavior when it's not being monitored. Except, most kids probably aren't doing these things. And then an added fear tactic against kids. Like, yes, some kids are gonna do some drugs and partying, some kids are gonna be sexually active, but this whole movie, amps that up to a pretty disgusting level and just turns it into fear-mongering and an over-exaggeration of stranger danger. Not only is your kid gonna get abducted, they're gonna give blowies at parties too. We get it. Don't meet people on the internet, I say, as I've traveled to numerous gaming and film events and met people from the internet. But yeah, don't go talk to people in real life that you met on the internet when you don't know who they are. If they say their camera is broken, walk away. Best case scenario, they're a catfish. Worst case scenario, they are a murder assaulter. But again, this is not actually found footage, not a real story. Yes, there are terrible child abductor, molester, murderers out there, and yes, there are absolutely groomers on the internet. A large section of the gaming community just this summer got exposed for having a large number of guy and gal groomers. But the main point is that this movie is not about an actual uncaptured assailant. But it randomly started blowing up on TikTok 9 years after its original release, then it spread to Twitter and a bunch of other social media areas, which is kind of the beauty of the internet. We saw something similar earlier this year when Splice ended up on streaming services and people started freaking out about that. Things that may not have performed well are having their chance to be seen and shine, and regardless of what I think of the movie in question, it's usually a really great thing. Add in the viral freak out of people trying to push that it's all real and you get the perfect scenario for a viral trend. But since it started blowing up on TikTok, we got a fresh new message from the director, Michael Goy.
I got a text from Amber Perkins, the lead actress in my movie, that it was exploding on TikTok at the moment, and I didn't get to give you the customary warnings that I used to give people before they watched Megan is Missing, which are: do not watch the movie in the middle of the night, do not watch the movie alone, and if you see the words photo number 1 pop up on your screen, you have about 4 seconds to shut off the movie if you're already kind of freaking out before you start seeing things that maybe you don't want to see. So apologies to those who are already posting about how the movie has freaked them out, but fair warning to those of you who are still contemplating watching the film.
And yeah, honestly, if you are watching this movie and feel bothered, you should probably click off right around the time you see photo number 1 pop up on the screen. And I appreciate what he's going for thematically, but it would have had such a bigger impact if it didn't suck so much as a movie. I get the idea of trying to get unknown actors and people that would come across as genuine, but this honestly plays out like some kind of 9th grade film project where no one really knows what they're doing. It is really hard to argue with people who just see this as a torture porn exploitation film, a genre that was super popular at the time that this was filmed, because it may have released towards the tail end of 2011 when this kind of movie was kind of falling out of favor, but it was filmed in 2006. It just took that long for someone to actually distribute it. And I'm honestly surprised he stuck with it for that long. For that alone, like, I guess good job, man. So the technology stuff that didn't make sense in 2011 really didn't make sense in 2006. Phones back then had like 512 megabytes of storage, not gigabytes, megabytes. But if this movie was actually good, I would ignore all that kind of stuff. I really want to believe that Michael had good intentions with this movie. You can still read his original message to viewers on the Megan is Missing website, but how he chose to express those concerns about child abductions and the dangers of the internet are questionable at best. But let's get into it. So it starts with this on-screen text saying that a girl named Megan Stewart went missing before her best friend Amy went missing 3 weeks later. It tries to set this movie off by looking like a documentary that's specifically compiled of cell phone transmissions and computer files. As if your video calls were constantly being saved as you were having them, even if they were on your cell phone, which 100% was not a thing in 2006. That's not even a thing now. But whatever, we'll let him have his cell phone transmissions. And we see these two girls that are like an opposites attract friendship. Megan's kind of the cool party girl who has a troubled home life, and Amy is the loser virgin with stable parents. Not my sentiments, just how the movie seems to express things. And we almost immediately get a piece of dialogue that is so ridiculous that I refuse to believe that everything from this movie is based on actual conversations the way Michael claims.
Virgins don't know how to wear makeup.
Excuse me? You've never fornicated before? Pfft. Good luck putting on that mascara. Anyways, it cuts to Megan having a video chat with a different friend, and she talks about doing sexual favors for drugs. And then this dude pops on screen as another supplier. Why are they hanging out with a 40-year-old? I'm trying to figure out how old this actor was at the time of filming, but it's the only movie he's ever been in, so I can't find any of his personal information. But this guy has to be firmly in his 30s. Is that a part of the horror? Like, not only are your kids partying, but they're partying with people that are the same age as you. But it cuts to how tumultuous Megan's relationship is with her mom, which definitely sucks, but the acting and the dialogue in this scene is horrible.
No, I paid for it! I get to smash it!
It's just so bad.
You know, only Gideon's slaves get the fairy dust.
I literally cannot stress enough how much this all comes across as a very horribly written and produced PSA by the local church group. But it's basically setting up that Megan has problems at home, so she's looking for that validation from other people and these parties. But it flips us over to Amy, and she is the polar opposite of Megan. She's sweet, innocent, and has a good relationship with her parents. Almost like anyone could fall victim of the predatory nature of the internet. Stay alert, stay safe, buckos! So this Ben guy is having a party with no dudes, but also no Amy's. But Megan's like, no Amy, no me. And since she's apparently Ben's premier party girl, his words, not mine, she actually has some leverage. Also, what party could be ruined by one individual when there's like 30 to 40 people there when that person is a nerdy little teenage girl and not a felon? But it's basically implied that she's gonna have to give him a little something something in exchange for bringing Amy. Ugh.
You just make sure you take a fucking bath.
So it's time for my favorite party activity, smoking an unlit joint. So at this point, it's basically just a bunch of candid party footage of kids drinking, smoking weed before Megan has to pay up to Ben. But while Amy is alone, this 40-year-old dude starts making moves on her and then punches her in the face when she says no.
Ah! Fuck you, bitch!
And this has like the absolute worst fight choreography I've ever seen. Like his fist is like a foot away from her face. And if accepting sexual favors from minors for drugs wasn't a felony, that certainly was. And I don't care how degenerate your party is, if some dude who looks like he's in his 30s punches a teenage girl in the face, someone's gonna take issue with that. Then she pukes on these two, and if the punch didn't ruin the fun, this certainly did. But it gets even more gross when Megan starts describing an incident when she was 10 where a 17-year-old camp counselor got her to service him. And this whole scene is unnecessarily descriptive. She's talking about how she was choking, and it's just so disgusting and adds nothing to the movie. But Michael Goy said this conversation and all the conversations were essentially taken word for word from conversations he had with 13/14-year-olds that were like his friends' kids. And honestly, if this is something you actually heard from one of your friends' kids, I hope to hell you made sure they got help and didn't just use it in your movie for exploitation purposes. Like, again, your intentions might have been good, but holy shit! Like, yeah, you can say I was just shocked that these girls were telling me stories about how they were like assaulted and taken advantage of, and they just didn't see it that way. I'm like, yeah, get them help so they can learn to see it that way. Oh my god! Again, maybe he did. I don't know, but still, I'm kind of grossed out that he allegedly used these stories to this extent. Like, I understand wanting to express that Megan's gone through all of this different abuse in her life and may not always realize when something horrible has happened to her that she's actually a victim of something, because it's just easier to pretend that she's the one who has control in a situation rather than accepting that something like that happened. But it absolutely does not need to play out this way dialogue-wise. So she talks about wanting to run away, maybe to Texas, and Amy says,
"If you go anywhere, I'm going with you."
Big foreshadowing there! But we find out that Megan's stepdad had actually been assaulting her from the age of 9 and that her mom didn't want to believe her, so it kept happening until he got arrested, and then her mom blamed her for it. Something that actually happens in real life, which always disgusts me. But she's back home having a chat with her friend who's definitely struggling with her sexuality, who tells her about this Josh guy she's been talking to who goes by the online name Skater Dude. So she decides to add him because her friend says he's super cool, but unfortunately his webcam is broken right now. Which honestly was still a viable excuse in 2006, so we'll allow it. But remember, kids, just because your friend says they know someone doesn't mean they're safe to talk to. Everyone is a suspect!
He's not my favorite bear. My favorite bear is Billy Bear. He's not here anymore.
Amy, oh my god, what did you do to Billy Bear? Like, this is supposed to just show how innocent she is in comparison to Megan and all the other people around her, but it just kind of unsettled me. But either way, Megan starts talking to that Josh guy. They agree to hang out after her and Amy see a movie, but then Megan doesn't show up to school the next day. So Amy tries calling around to all of Megan's friends who do answer, but then they instantly hang up because I guess she's actually just that uncool. Not uncool enough just to not answer the phone, but to be hung up on. So she adds Josh and he pretends that Megan blew him off and didn't show up. Then it cuts to the worst editing of a missing child segment I've ever seen.
Cries out, "My child is missing."
This would have seemed dated in the 90s, let alone 2006, and especially when the movie finally released in 2011. I realize that a lot of these like missing people or dramatized stories that you see online from these different publications do tend to come across a little bit cheesy, but when it's like a current active missing person, they don't treat it this way. It honestly just feels like Michael went crazy with the iMovie built-in effects. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that the director, writer, interviewer of Teen Girls, Michael Goy, also edited the movie. But they also just toss in this other missing boy at the end of that segment who went missing just the day before, with almost no coverage or information, but I'm also pretty sure it's the same guy they were talking about in that first conversation they had about doing favors for drugs.
Did you get some of that shit Tercel had today?
They're also looking for clues in the disappearance of 13-year-old Tercel Jackson.
Is it supposed to imply that he's not as desirable a victim as Megan? We don't really know anything about Tercel other than that aforementioned conversation about the drugs, and the only reason why I'm on this thought pattern is based on that message to viewers that Michael has on the Megan is Missing website, which is true, but there had to be a better way to show this because we're not given any information about who Tercel is as a person. So they end up getting security footage of Megan getting pulled away by some guy who definitely is not who this alleged Josh is. So Amy calls Josh again just to ask him about that footage that's been circling around. And at first he's overly complimenting her before insulting her when she doesn't like immediately like play into it, I guess, and then he basically admits that he took Megan.
What did you do to Megan?
Nothing she didn't do with 100 guys before.
So after this conversation, Amy rightfully goes to the police, ends up on the news, and for some reason, all of these other girls start getting mad at her and blame her for Megan's disappearance. Which makes no sense, but this one girl is definitely just in love with her.
She loved me. I loved her back. I loved her so much.
much!
Like, why do they think this is Amy's fault? I get that they're upset and not being logical, but at the same time, like, are you just putting the blame on her because you're the one who gave Megan Josh's contact information?
It's all your fault!
Anyways, turns out Billy Bear is alive and well, but oh my god, is that a looming individual spying on her? So Josh is super pissed that Amy's been blabbing to the cops because apparently when you make threatening statements about a missing girl, you're just supposed to carry on as usual. So the news people end up doing a reenactment of Megan being abducted, even though they have actual video footage of her being abducted.
And now a Megan is missing exclusive reenactment.
You're trespassing. Come with me.
This literally makes no sense. Like, if it was trying to make fun of all these different dramatic reenactments that happen, that would be one thing. But they do dramatic reenactments when it's either something they can't show or don't actually have the footage for. But whatever, at this point, some photos that the kidnapper had taken start getting shared in the movie, and this should have been the immediate indication that this was fake. If this was a real picture of a kidnapped minor in this state of distress, it would never have been shown publicly or in a documentary. I probably can't even show the picture on screen without risking demonetization or even like an age restriction. It's not that bad, but like the implication behind it, and if it was real, it would be horrible. But if you want to see it, look up photo number 1, Megan is missing. Again, it's fake, but it is kind of graphic if you're kind of like squeamish. It's basically Megan with a device that's kind of like holding her mouth open and then like pulling her nostrils back while she's in one of those kind of like hand and headlock things through a wooden board, but instead of being like this, she's upright. And if you thought it was real, this would be terribly disturbing, but it's not. So Amy goes back under the bridge and Billy Bear is missing. And then Skater Boy Josh manages to nab her without her hearing or seeing him while she was down there, which makes absolutely no sense. And then also manages to get her away without anyone hearing or seeing in broad daylight. So of course the friends want to do something for Megan, because frick Amy, I guess. So they come up with the pink ribbon campaign.
And hopefully you'll make whoever took her, feel bad and let her go.
Like, is this making fun of the things like the vigils people do when people go missing? Because that kind of stuff is nice. You just have to make these people seem really dumb. Anyways, but the cops end up finding Amy's camera in a trash can, and then we get this message. Why didn't he delete the footage before tossing it? Why did he even toss it? Why did he even film any of this if he was just gonna toss it? None of this makes sense. Anyways, the last 22 minutes of this movie are literally Amy being tortured. The one thing I will say in favor of Michael is that he insisted on having parents present for the entirety of the shoot, regardless of what scene was being filmed, just to make sure that the actors didn't agree or get into something that might have been a bit over their head. But that doesn't mean that anything in this last 22 minutes is remotely respectful. So the kidnapper gets her to eat out of a dog bowl, then he sexually assaults her. The final third of this movie is unnecessary torture porn that's supposed to have an important meaning. Guess what, Michael? This doesn't add shit to your message. In the end, he forces Amy into a barrel with Megan's decaying body, which absolutely had to just be for shock value, before burying her alive with the corpse. And this is like 7 to 10 minutes of him just digging this hole while she's giving her final words. Begging to be let go, wishing to be anywhere else, promising that she won't reveal who he is. And then he just ditches the camera into a trash can right outside the forest he buried them in. If he really didn't want the cops to find it, why did he bother filming any of it at all? Again, why didn't he delete the footage before ditching it? Like, I get that a lot of serial killers like notoriety, but by this point in history, forensic techniques were very well developed, and if he ditched it, it doesn't seem like he was trying to have it seen. And like, based on what's on this footage, they should be able to find the spot where they were buried pretty easily. They would likely have tons of evidence. Like, none of this makes sense. And then maybe the scariest thing of all, the movie ends with them having a conversation and they started singing Baby Shark?
Mommy Shark,
Truly ahead of its time. And that's it. This is honestly a pretty horrible movie from every possible metric, from the filming, the logic, the acting, the dialogue, and like what it's intending to do versus like how that was expressed in the movie. There are better movies that talk about the dangers of trusting people online. There are better stories that deal with child abductions. There are definitely better movies that deal with teens being put in situations that are like way too mature for them, or doing things because they're just trying to find their way in the world. Like, my mom hated me watching 13, but I definitely think it did a better job showing how teens can be affected and influenced by the people around them. awesome, and how quickly things can spiral when you're trying to find where you belong. It also had amazing performances from people who actually knew how to act, so it didn't feel like some kind of youth group funded PSA that went too far. Like, this is something that had good intentions and then went about expressing those intentions in the worst possible way. I'm not saying this movie didn't do a good job putting the fear of strangers on the internet into people. If you liked it and got something constructive out of it, that's awesome, but I just have like a really hard time wrapping my head around most of the decisions made for this movie. Like, the reality of the matter is you're more likely to be taking advantage of somebody that you are familiar with, that people do know, and then they're gonna use their position to try to quiet you and silence you. Obviously, if you're underage, do not have intimate conversations with people or meet people from the internet. If you're over the age of 18 and meeting people from dating sites, make sure it's in a very public place and let people know who you're meeting and where you're meeting them and check in with them. Yes, absolutely, there are people out there that are looking to do the worst, most depraved things to people. So just be aware of those things and don't be afraid to live your life. Anyways, that is the end of my TED Talk. Stay safe. If you want to know a little bit more about what Michael Goy was doing at the time this movie was being released, I would recommend checking out YMS's video that released back in 2011 when this movie came out. His video has a bunch of stuff from Michael on message boards, which was super interesting. But yeah, stay safe. Obviously, the stuff that happened in this movie are things that have and will continue to happen to people, but this wasn't based on a specific story, so don't be worried about Megan and Amy being buried somewheres in a barrel. So thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.